Song of Creation. Ever since the Ikoria set review on my stream, it has become somewhat of a meme in my community. I gave it a rating of 5 out of 5 WoW canisters, believing that it's going to be a great tool to storm off, to combo off, to build combo decks around and win that way in Modern. As I'm a big combo fan, I was really looking forward to that. Of course, that has not come to fruition for the past 2 years since the release of Ikoria, and obviously like the 5 out of 5 WoW canisters over some other cards like the Companions was a little bit of a miss, but I think today we finally have something on our hands. We have this nice beautiful combo deck which is functional and I think powerful. In this video I will be going over the ways in which this deck works and functions, and I hope it's going to answer all of your most frequently asked questions. I have to admit, I have mostly forgot about the existence of Song of Creation, but a few recent Magic Online results reinvigorated my interest in the archetype. Looking at the 3-1 preliminary decklist from Screenwriter NY and a 5-0 Modern League decklist from Giorgio Combo, and also borrowing some of the ideas from the more recent Neoform builds using Endurance to loop their graveyard and draw through their deck over and over, I have arrived at this list and I think we are onto something here. In this video I will be going over this deck, explaining how it functions and answering all of the frequently asked questions I get in the chat. So first, let's go over the basic premise of the deck. It is based around its namesake card, which is a very powerful draw engine. Whenever you cast a spell, draw 2 cards. A very strong effect, and if your deck is going to contain enough 0-cost cards, you will be able to draw through your entire deck. Once you draw your entire deck, winning should be trivial. There's also a drawback. At the beginning of your end step, discard your hand. It's a pretty hefty one, but if you treat it more as a dare or as a challenge, just trying to never aim to get to your end step in the first place, it's going to be quite manageable. So first, maybe let's go over the basic premise and let's talk about why it was so hard to build a good Song of Creation deck in the first place. As a Storm-like deck based around a certain card, you have to check a few boxes. First, you have to find your Song of Creation in time. Second, you have to play it, protect it from your opponent's disruption, resolve it through counter magic, etc. And third, you have to have a functioning combo. You need to have enough 0-cost stuff in your deck so that you're able to draw through your deck. Ideally, you want to be able to produce mana, and afterwards you need to find a win condition that you're going to use to eventually finally just win the game. An Offer You Can Refuse, which is a new card from Streets of New Capenna, helps a lot with many of the issues of the deck. Mainly, you use it as a way to produce extra mana during your combo turns, but you can also use it as a protection for your song, making sure that you resolve it, or you can use it as a way to ramp. For example, you can play a turn 1 Summoner's Pact, counter your own Summoner's Pact with an offer, and that way you get 2 extra treasures, letting you play Song of Creation as soon as turn 2. So obviously getting a nice multifunctional card that fixes a lot of your deck's problems is going to be very nice and a big improvement to basically any strategy. Now we're going to go over the execution of the combo. That's going to give you a better picture of why the cards are here and a better understanding of how the deck functions before we talk about the specific card choices. Obviously your combo will start with resolving a Song of Creation. The more mana and castable cards in your hand you have, the easier the combo will be to execute, but you don't need any extra mana to actually be able to win. You do need at least 1 mana available to start producing extra treasures with Offer, so keep in mind that you can spend your last mana if you want to still be able to combo on a given turn. That includes the land drop you will get, so you can tap out fully for your song and rely on your land drop producing you the requisite mana for your offers. Once Song is in play, you want to chain 0-cost cards and keep drawing through your deck. Wild Cantor and Strike Ridge are fine plays too, as their cost net 0 mana. Summoner's Pact might look a little bit weird in this deck, but it ties your combo turns together. By fetching an Endurance or a Wild Cantor, you get to draw 2 and tutor for another 0 or effectively 0 cost card, which makes it much tougher to dead end with your draws and fizzle during the combo. So I think the Summoner's Pact is pretty relevant in making sure that this deck is actually able to combo off consistently. When presented with an opportunity, you should offer your own spells to create extra mana. You are going to try to avoid offering your Summoner's Pact if it's not necessary, especially if you're still looking for extra spells to cast. Instead, you should be trying to offer your Engineered Explosives, Gut Shots, Pact of Negation, or Mishra's Baubles. You might need to think about how to time your land drop when comboing, especially if you're at a low life total and can't just proc in anything. You might need to think a little bit about how to exactly time your land drop when comboing. You don't want to commit to blue or red mana too early in case you need to cast an Offer or Strike at Rich, but not the other one. And you also don't necessarily want to play fetch land and draw all of your fetchables if you go too deep into your deck. On the other hand, you can draw an Offer you can refuse with Song's triggered ability. So there is a few things to juggle here, and it's going to all be very contextual. As soon as you have the opportunity to convert your land drop into a treasure, do it, as the treasure will allow you to cast anything. Once you packed for Endurance, you can evoke it and shuffle itself back with your graveyard to the bottom of your library, so that your other pacts can still grab it. Remember to stack your triggers in such a way that the Endurance dies first and then it reshuffles itself too. The goal is to reshuffle extra offers that you have already used back from your graveyard onto your deck. Notably, the Endurance looping does not allow your deck to go infinite. You cannot build Infinite Storm or draw infinite cards. That is because every spell still is going to draw you 2 cards while putting at most 1 card into your graveyard. So progressively, more and more of your deck is going to end up in your hand. You cannot go infinite, but you can build a huge amount of Storm, and you can recast your Grape Shot, and you can create a varying amount of treasures. It depends on the exact order in which you are going to draw your cards. But from experience, it seems like the maximum amount of treasures you can produce before decking is typically between 9 or 10. While comboing, avoid casting a second Song of Creation. It speeds up the rate at which you dig through your deck drastically, and it's going to potentially make it impossible to create enough Storm or treasures for you to win. Remember that Endurance puts the cards on the bottom of your deck, so depending on how many offers you have shuffled back into your deck, you will want to cast another Summoner's Pact immediately or as late as you can. That is because the Summoner's Pact will reshuffle your deck, potentially moving the offers closer to the top of your deck. The goal is to draw as many offers as you can as quickly as possible, as that is the way to maximize the amount of treasures you can produce. Before reshuffling your graveyard with Endurance, sacrifice all of your Mishra's Baubles. That way you bloat your deck and you can end up being able to create more treasures once again. Eventually, you will draw enough cards and produce enough mana to use one of your 2 win cons, Grape Shot or Master the Way, which is accessed via Glittering Wish, therefore you need 7 mana to cast it. We will talk about why we use 2 win cons later in the video. It's also a good practice to leave mana up, just in case that you can continue the combo and try again if your opponent does something unexpected to your win condition. Typically, you don't aim to pass the turn with Song, but sometimes it's the better choice if your hand is shaky. Think twice about whether you want to cast your first pact and put yourself in a situation where you're going to assuredly lose in the next upkeep. Sometimes, if your opponent's deck cannot remove Song and you're not dying on the next turn, it might be a wiser choice to just pass. If you're going to fizzle or just want to pass, remember to still cast all of your non-packed castable cards anyways, in order to put as many Mishra's Baubles into play and as many Strike at Rich into your graveyard. That will make it much easier to combo off on your next turn, where your entire hand is going to be discarded and you're going to be otherwise relying on just the top of your library. Now that we know how the deck functions, let's go over the specific card choices. Song of Creation, the namesake card of this deck, only in 3 copies. That is because we're using Glittering Wish as extra redundancy for it. So we have the 4th copy in the sideboard. to grab with the Glittering Wish. The original list I started with, that I copied from the Prelim free one, used Profane Tutor, but with the extra weakness to Teferi and having to wait 2 turns, it seems just worse. I tried Sterling Grove as another option to get some more consistency and find a song more often, but being both more expensive than Wish and a card disadvantage tutor were both very big drawbacks too. Glittering Wish opens up a Wish board in the sideboard where you have some flexible cards to grab in some specific spots. We're going to go over it later. Summoner's Pacts with Endurance and Wild Cantor, as previously mentioned, is pretty key to comboing off. Frequently when you start off your combo, you start from a relatively low resource base, so having those 0 drops that are basically supercharged that draw you not only 2 but 3 cards is frequently a difference between winning the game and just fizzling and dying. Wild Cantor is not absolutely necessary, but I find it useful in the lowest resource spots where you have the land laying around but you don't even have extra green cards for your Endurance to pitch. Notably, if not for Wild Cantor, this deck could be Kahira compatible, so maybe it is worth reconsidering. As for Endurance, you don't strictly need 2 copies of them, as given the fact that it reshuffles itself when evoked, you should be able to function with just 1. The second one is mostly here for convenience. It lets you cast the one you draw just normally in the game before you start comboing. It lets you use it as a hate card for Living End, and it also makes sure that you don't lose the game just because your Endurance has been exiled by a Ragavan trigger. Pact of Negation and Mishra's Bubble are both excellent 0-drop cards. Pact of Negation protects your combo, pushes it through counter magic. Mishra's Bubble is just a nice cantrip with fetch lands can help you find your song or Glittering Wish. Past that, we have Engineered Explosives and Gutshot as extra 0-drop cards that provide the deck with some interaction. I like Gutshot as some extra answers to Ragavan, although being a Phyrexian spell, it is not truly free at all times. It's very anecdotal and like speaking from experience, but it does feel like 1 or 2 Phyrexian spells is about the maximum amount of Phyrexian spells I would like to play. Your life total is frequently not well protected and you start comboing off at a low one, and you can afford to draw a very large amount of those. So just 2 Gutshots is what I'm liking. Other 0-drop options include Everflowing Chalice, which you could use as some extra ramp towards Song, and Noxious Revival, which can be helpful against discards, but I have found Gutshot to be more relevant than it, and as I said, can't run too many Phyrexian spells. Monomorphose is an effectively 0-cost card, although in practice you can't always cast it when you're just starting off your combo, so there is some awkwardness here and it's not overwhelmingly great to draw. Pact of the Titan and Infernal Plunge could be used as another way to produce extra mana, but given that when comboing successfully you are just drawing your entire deck anyways, you just don't need it, and those are not good cards to draw either. Also, the ideal amount of 0-cost cards in this deck is pretty hard to determine. As you can see, the amount is pretty high, 17 like actually 0-cost cards, the Endurance, which is conditionally free, and Offer, Strike Rich, and Wild Cantor, all being net 0 mana once you have 1 mana available. I have tried builds with fewer 0-cost cards, but it is very easy to reach a point where it's actually hard to combo off. So this felt like roughly a good amount of 0-drops that I would like to have in my deck. In the last few slots we have what we could call the flex slots, Utopia Sprawl and Veil of Summer. Sprawl helps you ramp towards your 4 mana card, and given that you need to resolve your 4 mana card to win the game, it seems like a useful effect to me, and I've been pretty happy with it. Been pretty happy with being able to make some extra mana. Strike Rich and an Offer you can refuse can already ramp you, but I felt like having a little more ways does not hurt. Especially as I mentioned previously, it is much easier to combo if you start with a higher resource base that includes both cards in your hand and mana in play. So I'm not unhappy to run Utopia Sprawl. And Veil of Summer might seem like a pretty extreme mainboard card, but I find it to be very excellent in a deck that basically only carries about resolving an enchantment and then just winning. Very conveniently, if those cards are dead, they're green so that you can pitch them to your endurance while comboing, so that all flows quite nicely. I tried a few other cards in the flex spots, those were Serum Visions, but the mana really couldn't take those too well. It was really hard to support both Striker Rich, Serum Visions, and Glittering Wish in the same deck. I tried Commune with Spirits, which is an interesting card, can help you find your Song of Creation, but I think it works somewhat poorly with having only 3 Songs of Creation in your deck because of the Glittering Wish. Another option would be Abundant Harvest, also a green country, but it's not particularly good at finding specific spells, so it is not really something that we're interested in. To speak a little bit about the mana base, almost everything is a forest, which makes sense in a Utopia Sprawl deck. The one non-forest shockland of choice being Sacred Foundry to facilitate the Strike It Rich into Glittering Wish mana curve nicely. On top of that, we have Gemstone Mines. Gemstone Mine is silently, I think, pretty important and very valuable. It lets you have a land in your deck that produces any color of mana that you can draw, that is always going to enter the battlefield untapped, that is going to be painless, which is useful when you start comboing off at a low life total and you can't necessarily afford to play a Shockland or a Fetchland. And in the last 2 slots we have Yavimaya and Boseiju. Yavimaya is nice in some of the longer games, lets you not crack your fetches and lets your Gemstone Mines not die, while also just functioning as a forest for Utopia Sprawl. And Boseiju, some extra interaction for potentially problematic permanents, I think is pretty worthwhile to have. Another card that I would like to include in my mana base that I think would be pretty good is Otawara. Unfortunately, an island is just really bad in this deck. It does not cast Strike It Rich, does not cast Utopia Sprawl, does not contribute towards Glittering Wish, so the color is just really too bad on Otawara and I don't think the deck can support it because of that. Now let's go over a few of the cards that I don't play, yet I get asked about frequently. First of them is going to be Wish. It obviously compares to Glittering Wish, but the answer as to why I don't play Wish is simple. It just doesn't function as a combo enabler. To play a Song of Creation with it in the same turn costs a whopping 7 mana, which is just not the amount of resources you have, so it is not viable as an extension of your Songs of Creations. With Glittering Wish, a very common line is to go turn 1, Strike It Rich or Utopia Sprawl, turn 2, Glittering Wish, grab your song, turn 3, play your song, and win. Wish does not enable that. Hive Mind could be used as an alternative win condition. Since you're already running 4 Summoner's Pact and 4 Pact of Negation, you can use Hive Mind to let your opponent copy the pacts and die to their own trigger in their upkeep. I have tried it, it does not work too well. It's not a good card to draw while you're comboing, getting to 6 mana is painful, and having pacts in hand is also not a given, so it's overall a very tough task, on top of which sometimes people can just pay for their pacts. Manamorphose is not in my deck for the reasons that we already mentioned. Is it not always castable during the first few spells of the combo, which are typically the most crucial. Once you get going, you don't have trouble going off, but the Manamorphose can clog you if you draw it early. Fury is a 0-cost card that is also nice, flexible, and you can hardcast it with Utopia Sprawl sometimes for value and try to hit from a different angle. I think it's not too terrible, but just the red card count is very low in this deck, so you can't effectively pitch it. Expressive Iteration is a great card. Typically, you know, all of the best decks do play Expressive Iteration, but it does not mean that every deck will be better for adding Expressive Iteration, as a deck like this, a combo deck like this, just does not have good cards to cast off of your Iteration in the middle turns of the game, and it's not what this deck is interested in. It does not function here at its best. And last, different win cons. Thassa's Oracle, Conflagrate, or any amount of different win cons that people suggest. They might open some new doors to you that would be locked otherwise. For example, going actually infinite if you think about your win con hard enough, or you can like beat Infinite Life with Thassa's Oracle. In current Modern, for the most part, those things don't matter. And what I think matters is the fact that the Master the Way WinCon is very compact. You don't need to play anything extra in your main deck, just the Glittering Wishes that you want anyways to find your song, and Grape Shot is a good card to draw while also functioning as a WinCon. You can cast your Grape Shot on a Ragavan on turn 2, for example, and it's a perfectly fine use of the card. You can't do that with many of the other different win conditions that you could use, so I think Grape Shot is probably just the best one. Now that we know why are we playing the cards we're playing in the main deck, let's talk over how this deck functions versus hate and how does it need to interact. First, the win cons. As we mentioned previously, we have Master the Way in the sideboard and Grape Shot. Master the Way is the most slot efficient win con, but you do need to produce 7 treasures with an offer you can refuse to reliably combo with it. Grape Shot, on the other hand, is the emergency win con that you have in your deck that you might need to have access to be able to beat certain hate cards. When you're playing against a matchup where you know those specific hate cards are not going to be present, you can safely board out Grape Shot. I do that, for example, against Rhinos or against Blue-Red Merctide. In those matchups, you can reliably combo off with Master the Way. So, the types of interaction that you might need to fight through are going to be first the most generic ones. Counter Magic. This deck honestly surprised me with how resilient is it to Counter Magic. Being able to play Pact of Negation and Offer, and on top of that, a playset of Well of Summer in the post-board games, you just have lots of tools to fight through a simple counter spell. So fighting through 1 or even 2 counter spells on any given turn is not a big problem. You can definitely do that. Then discard spells like Thoughtseize. Those are a little bit harder. I have tried to play with cantrips in the deck, but I have found that the best way to find Song of Creation is just to have Glittering Wish, Song of Creation as basically 7 copies of the same card in your deck, and then trying to use the London Mulligan as a tool to find your Song of Creation in your opening hand. Which means that if you mulligan to 1, especially if you mulligan low and get your Song or Wish discarded, that could be a little bit problematic. But if this card is all your opponent has, Well of Summer can definitely do a lot here. I would advise against sideboarding Leyline of Sanctity to fight this card with this deck, as I think it's just going to take too big of a toll on the deck, and you will inevitably need to reduce the amount of 0 drops in your deck, so your combo would become not as functional anymore, so I think it's not a good idea. Now onto the more specific problem cards. First of them is going to be Teferi, Time Raveler. With Teferi in play, you can't cast Offer, you can't refuse, and you can't cast Pact of Negation. That reduces the amount of 0-drop castable cards in your deck and means you can't make extra mana. This is where Grape Shot becomes relevant, as it still lets you win through a Teferi in play if you start your combo with just an extra mana available. You're going to be able to use that 1 extra mana available and your land drop from Song of Creation to still draw through your deck with your remaining 0 drops, hopefully, and then casting Grape Shot and killing your opponent. Out of the sideboard, you can use Mind Collapse, which is a 0-cost card that kills Teferi and unlocks your ability to make treasures in the middle of the combo. So therefore Teferi is annoying, but does not absolutely need to be dealt with. Next in line is Karn the Great Creator. His passive stops treasure making, so you are also going to need Grape Shot to combo through Karn. It's less of a realistic concern, as Karn is often going to be accompanied by a tough to beat hate card anyways, but Grape Shot can still come in handy here. When facing hard graveyard hate, let's say Rest in Peace, Leyline of the Void, or Duffy Voidwalker, your graveyard is shut off, so you can't use Endurance to loop your deck. So since you can't loop offers, you just can't plausibly make 7 treasures throughout the game, and you will not be able to access Master the Way to win the game. Because of that, against those cards you are also going to need Grape Shot, even if they're not normally super effective against you. If your opponent brings those in, you do want to have access to your Grape Shot. If your opponent sideboards Leyline of Sanctity, you're going to need to use Glittering Wish for Wear, Boseju, or Engineered Explosives to clear the Leyline before you kill them with your win condition, as both of them target. I sometimes get asked about Flusterstorm countering Grape Shot. Typically not going to be a problem. You can use either Well of Summer, or you can reshuffle your Grape Shot onto your deck again, redraw it, and Grape Shot your opponent just again, even if it got countered. There are a few harder hate cards that make it impossible to go off and that need to be dealt with before starting. Those include Meddling Mage, Trinisphere, Dumping Sphere, Rolling Vortex, Idol of Rhetoric, and to lesser extent, Eidolon of Great Revels, and Narset, Parter of Veils. Thankfully, none of those cards are really played all that often, so it's fine. Blood Moon can mess your mana a little bit, but it's not a big problem. Between fetching a basic, Utopia Sprawl, Striked Ridge, and Offer Making Treasures, you should be able to produce 2 extra colors of non-red mana, and then you're able to go off typically. Lavinia, Chalice of the Void, and Void Mirror are each a little bit of a problem, but not something that absolutely needs to be addressed while comboing. They do counter your 0-drops, but you don't care about that, as you can still draw cards with Song of Creation, so that does not have too much relevance. Chalice on 0 is basically ignorable. Lavinia and Void Mirror are also going to counter your Evoked Endurance, so you might not have access to the ability to loop your graveyard when facing those cards. Therefore, you might need your Grave Shot to win without that. Notably, all of those cards' abilities counter your spell before you draw your 2 cards from your song, so they all make you slightly more likely to fizzle by the virtue of making the situation where you have Pact of Negation or an offer you can refuse and no possible target to put on the stack, so that can happen. And the last problematic card is Boseiju, who endures. Normal Dissensions are not really a problem because once you are comboing and drawing plenty of cards from your deck, you are able to keep up a Pact of Negation for like any plays that your opponent would like to perform after you're already deep in your combo. Since Boseiju is a channel ability, you can't counter that with Pact of Negation, and there is frankly not a great way to deal with that. I have tried Sterling Grove, Simic Charm, or Repudiate as a sideboard technology that you could grab with your Glittering Wish to answer Boseiju, but unfortunately none of those are great. You could also use Spiffing Needle out of your sideboard as a normally sideboardable card, but again, it's not great. Thankfully, the way you can beat Boseiju is by drawing 2 to 6 cards with your song triggers before your song goes away and grabs you an extra land. If your hand was quite good, you might actually be able to just recast song again and keep going off. Otherwise, you might need to build up your resources for the upcoming turn and try to go off on the next turn. So as you see, there is actually kind of few effects that really stop this deck. There is a bunch of things that throw small curveballs into this deck's wheels, but for the most part, it's not that easy to stop. It does not rely on going through the graveyard too much, and it can fight through generic interaction quite well. And now to round this guide off, we're going to go over the sideboard. First, let's check the wish board. We have access to a Song of Creation, number 4, which is the most common wish target. We grab it every time we just need it to combo. Master the Way is the win con card. Again, we play it because that way you can sideboard out Grape Shot if we don't need Grape Shot. Cultural Response helps to plow through counter magic easier. Fire Spout can kill some creatures if you're under pressure. It is not absolutely needed. It is not that great against most of the decks existing in Modern right now, so I'm not 100% sure about whether I want to be playing it. Wild Cantor in the sideboard is a 0-cost card effectively to grab with Glittering Wish if you need to cast your Glittering Wish during your combo to continue going through your deck. It comes up surprisingly often. Werther, a flexible answer to any problematic artifacts or enchantments that might come in your way. Simic Charm is an aforementioned way to counter Boseiju's ability. It is a little bit hard to keep up. 2 extra mana is a lot, but it's useful. And the last card, we have Teferi, Time Raveler. I wish for Teferi mostly when I go turn 2 wish, turn 3 I would have an empty turn anyways, and turn 4 I would like to play a song. That happens when you already have a song in your hand and you're wishing on turn 2. Teferi is a way to force action from your opponent, spend a counter spell, or else it will be dead anyways. Other wish board options include playing an Omnath, Locus of Creation, which I tried and it was not coming up too often. You could also play Dragonlord Dromoka as a golden, uncounterable threat that can protect your combo. Not really a big fan of that. Fiery Justice or Lightning Helix could be used as removal for problematic creatures like Thalia. Or you could also go with Safe Ride Quest, which you would wish for when you need to hit your land drops. But it's probably not gonna come up too often either. And then we have a few real sideboard cards in the deck. Currently, I have 2 Nature's Claim, 2 removal spells, the Mind Collapse against the Fairies and Karns, mostly, and 2 extra Well of Summers. Bell of Summer is basically what I will not leave my house without when playing a combo deck. It's the best way to push through your combo against discard and counter magic. So I'm definitely playing 4 of those. A few removal spells and a few Nature's Claims are nice against Burn or against Colossus Hammer decks with Lavinia, etc. Letting you buy some time while also you get to survive. And you can answer the cards that might need to be answered before you can go off. I'm playing Snapback right now because it can just be another free card while comboing, so that's a pretty cool utility on my bounce spell. There's probably plenty of ways the sideboard could go in, and we are just at the beginnings of the deck's existence, so it is all very much subject to change. So overall, as a big combo fan, I am excited about this deck and I really enjoy playing it, and I have a really good time trying to improve it and make it more functional. And as I said at the beginning of the video, I do think we have something on our hands. I think the deck has potential to brawl with the strongest. I will be trying to play it in some Magic Online challenges in the future. And remember to visit my Twitch channel where I'm going to be playing this deck, twitch.tv/kanister_MTG, or go to my YouTube VODs channel where I store and archive all of the past streams from Twitch. There's plenty of Song of Creation gameplay available here. Peace.